Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James, and I review fountain pens, and I've got another one for you today that I think you might like. This one, a few of you have commented on this pen and mentioned it in comments before when I was reviewing other pens. It's been on my wish list to buy on Amazon and eBay, a couple of different sellers. I'm the buyer. A couple of different sellers. For really quite a long time, and it just kind of, other things would edge it out a little bit. And so finally I bit the bullet and I bought this pen, and it's a shame that I waited so long. I really like this pen, but there are some things about it that I like. There are some things about it that maybe I don't. We'll get into that over the course of the review, and we're going to start with the design of the pen. So let's flip the camera and we will look at the design of the pen and then do the writing test. I'll tell you what I like and don't like and whether or not I recommend it for you. Okay, so here is the Delike Brass pen. I like this pen. The machining here, you will notice, let me get a close-up. The machining is done with an incline pattern, and so you can hold that with your hands and do that, and it will actually go up just like a bolt or a screw. That's a good thing, because that, combined with your fingerprints, you can get a grip on this pen like nobody's business. And it just makes it to where it's not a fingerprint magnet, and it's not slippery. Those are some things that for some people are turn-offs about metal pens, and this does not have those problems. And I just find it to be a very well-made pen, and has a good heft to it. I would compare this in terms of weight to that Delike Brass pen. I know I probably didn't say that right, but to the brass pen that I've reviewed before. I'll put the link up here. And that pen I really like. It is one of the best values in a brass pen that you're going to find. This one is an upgrade. It's going to cost you a little bit more. It's still a fairly inexpensive, especially you talk brass fountain pens with good heft and well made. This is an inexpensive option for you, but as an upgrade from that other pen, which is not that's not a slap against that other pen. It's great, but this one is even better. So let's look at the design. Very, very simple torpedo design. Not much to talk about there. You will find that it is threaded at the bottom of the barrel and at the top of the cap, and I think that one at the top of the cap must just be to match, because I don't know what you would ever thread on there, but there it is. The finial, extremely simple. It's polished at this end, and at the other end, it is not. It actually has a bit of a very, very faint pattern on the other end, and just a little bit of a point, as you can see. But you can take the cap and you post it by threading it at the other end. That way you don't lose it. Of course, there's no clip to mess with, but as you have that posted, you're not going to have to worry about that rolling off the desk, as you have seen me do multiple times in my videos if you've been watching for a while. But I find it to be well balanced. It's not, I don't find it to be too top heavy. I probably would write with it more unposted than posted, but if I were away from my desk, away from home, I like that you have the option of screwing that on and posting that and not losing it. You have the section, which is this nice curved section, which gives you a good purchase on the pen, and it's not too thin, not too thick. I find it to be quite comfortable, and the threads that are here for the cap are not so sharp that they're uncomfortable. If you're kind of a high gripped writer, that's not going to bother you. That certainly doesn't bother me anyway. And so there is all of that. Let me depost so that I can have room to work here. Let's look at the nib. The nib on this pen is, see if I can remember, it is an extra fine. I think it writes more fine than extra fine, but this is an extra fine by Delike standard. And it says, super quality, and is a standard steel nib. It writes well. I think this pen writes very well, smoothly, and with a typical finned plastic feed. Let's take off the barrel, which comes off very easily. And this is a weird thing to even comment on, I guess, because it's not the biggest deal in the world. But one nice thing about a brass pen, you can just take that off, get a little bit extra spin as you take it, compared to a plastic. Just comes right off, even though it takes several. It does come with a converter, so you already know I'm happy about this. And so I will put the size and type of the converter in the notes here in the video. But I love that it comes with that, and that's helpful. So let's get on to the writing test of what is a really nice, good quality brass pen. All right, so now for the all-important writing test, because a pen can be great, but if it doesn't write, what on earth is the point of that thing? So this is, again, the Delike fountain pen, brass pen. I don't know if it has a name beyond that. And as I mentioned earlier, it is labeled as an extra fine, but this is actually, I've held something back from you here, this is actually a bent nib. One of the cool things about the Delike brass pen is that you can get it in fine, extra fine, or you can get it in this bent nib. And so I chose to do that. So I'm going to put it as a bent nib. I'm not sure if that's actually the right way to designate that, but that's what we're going with today, because that's what we got. And what I have in this pen, since it does come with a converter, I got to choose, right? And that's one of the lovely things about a converter pen. This is a Pelican. And this is that royal blue. I really like this ink. I've had a couple of pens where I'd had trouble with them with some other inks. A black ink that I use in particular. I had a pen that I'm going to review soon that they weren't very happy with each other. But this Pelican ink, a lot of you have had the same experience. It just performs well in a lot of different pens, and sometimes a pen that doesn't like the ink I put in it first, I'll clean it out, I'll put the Pelican in, and it'll just write perfectly. And so sometimes it's, ink choice does affect sometimes our impressions of a pen. In fact, the pen I mentioned that I'm going to review here in a week or two, or probably, in a week or two, I didn't even like it. I was just about to completely give up on it. I didn't even like it enough to bother giving it a review, but I probably would go ahead. And I'm glad that I changed the ink out, because it wasn't the pen's fault. It was just the ink. So, back to this. With the bent nib, I'm going to be quiet, and you can listen and see if you hear much feedback. Not going to get a whole lot out of that, are you? Just a nice, smooth nib. And it does, of course, because it's a bent nib, you get some slight variation. You can see there at the end of that N, and in this D you can see it. So you get some variation just kind of naturally. It's not something that you want to try and force out of it. It's just, it's made to give you a little, not a whole lot. It's not as much. For example, if you're familiar with the Bobby custom nib that he does on the Jinhao, mine is a Jinhao 51A. That one gives you much more. There's more of the bent metal than this one. This is a finer line than that pen. But if you're familiar with that, it's kind of that in miniature, I guess is the way I would put that. Just a finer line. So you can see there's just that little bit there. But I really like it. It writes well. It just kind of glides smoothly over the paper, as it should. That's the way that's meant to work. And not at all difficult. Sometimes people have a question of whether or not that's easy to find the sweet spot and keep it on a pen like that. I don't find that it is. I find this is just a really easy pen to write with. So, excellent. I have been very, very pleased. And then you put together, this is a fairly inexpensive pen. I'll put a link so that you can see an example of what it costs. It's great. I think for the money, you get a pen that could quite literally be passed down to your grandkids, probably, as long as you keep it clean and, every now and then flush it out so that nothing gets clogged inside. There's no reason that they're not going to find this in your estate someday and say, man, Grandma had a pretty cool pen. So I do highly recommend that. And I just realized that I did not do a size comparison so that you can kind of tell. I've forgotten that the last couple of times and had to put that back in. So this is the brass Errata pen, and you notice that the finish is very different. This has kind of a protective finish on the brass, which is very durable. I actually kind of want some patina on this pen, and whatever finish they use is so good it's kind of preventing that. But that gives you a size comparison, very similar in size and weight, just very different in style. You might prefer this because it does come with a clip where this doesn't. I like the aesthetic of this pen better. Then you have the Moonman 80, a very different pocket pen, but this is probably the smallest. Well, no, that's almost the smallest that I have. There is also the Oto Tasha, an excellent little fountain pen. That's an upcoming review. Or the Pilot Petite. Lots of different choices. Very, very different. And of course, this is your light plastic choice. Excellent little fountain pen. Reviewed that before. Some of you have the Bina Magic, or you've ordered it and it's on the way. By size, let's move some of those out of the way now. By size, very, very similar, totally different style. Here is the Kaweco Sport, and that gives you an idea there of that size. So there you go. And just for good measure, here's how it stacks up to a Samsung Note 10 pen, kind of the opposite of a fountain pen in many ways. But that gives you some size comparison of the pen. I hope you've enjoyed the review. I hope you'll like and subscribe. And while we're all stuck at home watching videos because of the coronavirus here in the U.S., why don't you share the video, and maybe you'll be able to pen-able somebody into the fountain pen world. In the meantime, I hope you stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time.